Hello everyone, this is POW Ponderonweather. In this update, we're going to be talking about an atmospheric river with very high winds, a warm up, and then a potential major snowstorm next week as Arctic air pours in. So if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. Good morning everyone. This is your Monday, November 15th update. What we're taking a look at here is out here in the Pacific Ocean of this atmospheric river that continues to pummel the Pacific Northwest. You can almost see the train of moisture. They actually call this the Pineapple Express out here, and the bigger version is the atmospheric river, but it almost looks like an elephant trunk here, just with the fire hose of precipitation impacting Hawaii, actually, and that funnels all the way into the Pacific Northwest, more predominantly right now into Washington, where they've seen a lot of flooding out there. That just continues for the rest of the day into the day tomorrow. So let's take a look at this, at the overall jet stream, because this week we typically have what they call a kind of a zonal pattern. This jet stream is well to the north, funneling into our northern areas, into Washington and to Canada, as well as Montana. Down to the south, you'll see kind of a rapid warm up and a lot of clear skies, a lot of sun down here in the southern regions, where actually they could be experiencing some record highs over the next several days. But the jet stream is predominantly well to the north for at least the first couple days of this week, but then this is really going to be cranking from west to east, and with that there are going to be some very high winds associated with it. So let's take a look at some of the wind gusts over the next 3 days with this active jet stream. So yeah, even today, today, tomorrow into Wednesday, as this jet moves across, we could be looking at wind gusts of 50, 60, upwards to 70 miles an hour off the west coast here. Not out of the question as you move inland, good 40 to 50 mile per hour swath. Once you get into Idaho and especially into Montana, some of these areas could be picking up 60, 70, even upwards to almost 90 to 100 mile per hour wind gust in isolated spots. In fact, yesterday they had 117 mile per hour wind gust in Montana. So, and that continues today. So very high winds. They've got high wind warnings pretty much for the entire state of Montana as this would continue moving across. We do have the jet stream dipping a little bit in the into the middle of this week into Wednesday going into Thursday. That'll bring some of the higher winds further down to the south, but not nearly as extreme. We're talking into the 30 and 40, upwards to 50 mile per hour wind gust at times going into Kansas, Oklahoma, getting into parts of West Texas. So let's take a look at today. So here's the overall map. We've been having all that kind of heavy snow at times that fell yesterday into the Ohio Valley. We talked about that dynamic cooling taking place, and that actually did come to fruition in these areas, and it's kind of wringing out the leftover moisture that's left over, and then some of this will be lake enhanced induced. But yeah, for a good chunk of the country, you can see the warm front here buckles all the way to the north. That's the south wind, and underneath it, yeah, you're talking widespread 70s, if not 80s. I think Tucson's going to maybe hit 89 degrees today. So some very warm stuff. Panhandle of Texas, lower 80s. Even Dallas may touch 80 degrees today. So definitely some warm stuff. To the north, there's the flow. Very heavy rain off the Pacific Northwest, especially in the further northern parts of Washington, where they're just getting crushed with a lot of flooding out there. But yeah, the atmospheric river continues to pummel the Pacific Northwest. And again, that feeds all the way down to Oregon again, and all the way down to Northern California, at least for today. And then some of that transfers over to like a wet snow as you get more like into the interior regions. As we go through the day tomorrow, not really much has changed. The atmospheric river does tend to die down a little bit, but you've been hitting a lot the last several weeks, so you do get somewhat of a reprieve by the time we get in the middle of the week. But we're watching this cold front. That's going to be the major player, at least this week, as out ahead of it, you still have that warm surge of very warm air out ahead of it. So by the time we get into that Wednesday time frame, the atmospheric river finally comes to a stop and then you get kind of a drying out. You actually need time to dry out there. You've been getting crushed lately. There's the cold front out ahead of it, so there's that very high winds back behind it. Out ahead of it, yes, there's not much lift with this particular system, so you could ring out some isolated showers or two into the Dallas-Fort Worth area, parts of Arkansas here, parts of Missouri. But again, there's not much really lift with this particular system, as the jet is well to the north. It's just kind of wringing its moisture out. But as we get into the day on Wednesday, Thursday, and here's your Friday temperature anomalies, by the time that cold front, this is not the major Arctic push that I'm expecting. That comes next week. But still, with behind that warm up that you're going to be seeing into Oklahoma and much of the central states, into Texas for the next 3 days, by the time we get into that Thursday time frame, the temps drop about 15 to 20 degrees below what you would be experiencing. So you're talking maybe high as 60 in the Dallas-Fort Worth area by the time we get into the Thursday, going into Friday, and those colder anomalies continue to press into the Ohio Valley, into parts of the Southeast, where they just woke up yesterday with a freeze. And so you're going to have a little bit of a warm up, but then yes, the cold air comes back by the time you would get into that Thursday, Friday time frame. So, but next week, that's where all the changes are going to be taking place, as the jet stream would buckle a lot. And so by the time we get into that Monday time frame on the 22nd, we've got blocking setting up over Alaska. We've got that deep trough penetrating further south. Look at the 540 line going all the way down into Missouri. But then you have a developing trough out here off the west. So that's a major difference, because that's going to have a little bit of moisture with it. And as cold air taps into the system, it's going to be able to draw in that moisture and ride up, and could create a pretty big snowstorm getting into portions of the Ohio Valley into the Northeast, especially as we get into that, Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. And we actually had confirmation of this with the Southern Oscillation Index this morning, with a negative drop. We are in a La Nina type pattern, so we typically see a drying out of the southern jet. It's not as active, so a lot of these southern regions has experienced below average precipitation. But there are times where we could get hints of a little bit more active pattern. You can actually see the dip in the Enzo. We actually hit even moderate criteria at a time at the beginning of November, but it's since reprieved back to that weak status that I think is going to be, pretty much going to be leveling off there for the rest of the time that it's expected to be in a La Nina through the early part of spring. But the noticeable drop in the confirmation, because this is a lagging indicator, we had daily values of 17, 20, 22, but then all of a sudden now it starts creeping down to the single digits, and this morning it went negative. And that negative drop tells me that with a lagging indicator, by the time we get to that 7 to 10 day lagging type indicator, going into the Thanksgiving week, the Southern Oscillation, the subtropical jet, is going to be able to come a little bit more active. And as cold air drains from the north, it's going to be able to tap into some of that moisture and going to be able to ride and feed that system into the Ohio Valley, into the Northeast by the time we get into that early part of next week before Thanksgiving. So let's take a look at this, because by the time we get into Tuesday, that 23rd time frame, you got the surge pushing from the north. You got the trough still hanging out west. It's going to be able to pump in some of that Gulf moisture and help feed this system. And then some of these, this is the 500 millibar. So yeah, that's very cold air aloft, and that's going to be able to drain down to the surface. It's going to be able to mix in with that precipitation, and we could create a pretty big snow event, if not a major snowstorm, by the time we get into that Tuesday, Wednesday time frame, riding up into the Ohio Valley, riding up into the Northeast. So let's take a look at this, because beyond that, we just kind of have a reinforcing shot. That one system will kind of die off a little bit, subside, but we have a reinforcing shot coming back from the north that's just going to continue to bring the below average temperatures. And with the trough still out west, but this is 10 days from now. This is the 24th. It's still going to be able to pull in a lot of that precipitation and a lot of that colder air. So I do feel by the time we get into that 21st, 22nd time frame into the central part of the US and to the east, it's going to remain below average and remain active for the rest of the 10 days to end November. So let's take a look at the overall surface map. By the time we get into that Monday, November 22nd, into the afternoon, look at the red line. That is your freezing line. That's the indication of some of that Arctic air draining from the north. We should be able to tap in and start squeezing the atmosphere out, starting to put more snow where they saw some snow yesterday into Indiana and Ohio, getting back into Pennsylvania again as this storm would really start to get its act together. By the time we get into that Tuesday morning, as the Arctic air continues to drain, there's the red line. That's the freezing line. Puts the freezing line all the way down into parts of the Red River of Texas, all the way into northern parts of Louisiana, all the way into the midsection of the southeast. And out to the north of that, it's going to be cold enough to snow and be able to wring that precipitation out over the Tennessee Valley, over parts of Kentucky, over the Ohio Valley, getting into Pennsylvania, getting into upstate New York, getting into Vermont, New Hampshire. Those areas could be looking at a pretty big snowstorm on the table by the time we get into that Tuesday timeframe. And then going into Wednesday, look at the freezing line dropping all the way down into the coast of the southeast, even in the Florida Panhandle. Much of the southeast should be below freezing, if not a hard freeze, by the time we get into that Wednesday, November 24th timeframe. And that one system is going to be kind of wringing itself out. But we have a reinforcing shot of colder air that's still going to be draining further south. So that's going to move in for Thanksgiving, and then Friday after Thanksgiving, and then to Thanksgiving weekend, and to the central and eastern 2/3 of the United States. And so, yes, by the time we wake up on Wednesday, November 24th, here's just kind of an indication. Yesterday, you saw some freezing temperatures in the southeast. But by the time we get into 9-10 days from now, that's a hard freeze is going to be on the table for much of Alabama, much of Mississippi and Alabama, here into Georgia, into the Carolinas. I mean, look at 30 degrees dropping all the way down into the Florida Panhandle, even Tampa. It's going to be 34 degrees. So that is some cold stuff entering the picture, and that'll continue to press southward. And then the feels like anomalies is going to be really cold, kind of, this is all, this is November, right? This is not January, this is not February, this is November. So definitely a cold shot of air feels like as you wake up on Wednesday morning in the teens, and much of Georgia, much of the Carolinas, and those single digits will be across the Ohio Valley. Is kind of the feels like as that colder air continues to drain. And then, like I mentioned, I think we just have a reinforcing shot after that. So, but for the next 6-7 days, with that zonal flow, there's the atmospheric river would stay in effect today and tomorrow, but it'll tend to die down. But pretty dry conditions for much of the country. We do have that midweek cold front that's going to wring out some precipitation, but there's not much lift with this particular system. Yes, the highest lift could be over Arkansas, portions of southern Illinois, parts of Kentucky here with maybe an inch of rain. But other than that, it's a quarter inch, half inch for the week, and much of the midsection of the country as kind of be in between systems. But here's the precipitation to pick up on that Monday, pick up on that Tuesday, that Wednesday timeframe of next week. So this is the overall 10-day precipitation. So yeah, and then you're adding to those totals, especially into the Ohio Valley and much of the Northeast and off the East Coast here, with multi-inch rains. Now, a lot of this is actually going to be forming in the form of snow, because here's your preliminary snow amounts by the time we get into that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, picking up on a potential major snowstorm in parts of the Ohio Valley, getting into Pennsylvania, getting into upstate New York, going into Vermont, New Hampshire, going into Maine here. And obviously we'll be able to fine tune this particular system as it gets closer. But I do feel there's going to be a lot of cold air in place, plenty of cold air aloft. It's going to be able to drain down to the surface. This is an Arctic air in nature. So yes, some of the models aren't going to be able to pick up on this until we get a little bit closer to the event, because it is Arctic air. But with that confirmation of that southern jet drop into negative, that southern oscillation, and that gives me more confidence that we're going to have an active storm track by the time we get into that Thanksgiving week. And then beyond that, it just continues, because here's the overall the alignment of where the cold air will be predominantly in place from the 21st through the 26th time frame. Not out west, and not much of Colorado, and not really much of West Texas. It's pretty much going to be predominantly, Texas could be like clipped from this system, but predominantly the coldest anomaly air will be over the Great Plains, be over the Ohio Valley, be over the Southeast, and then getting into parts of the East. Then as we continue into that Thanksgiving to the end of the month of November, the coldest anomalies will drain all the way down into Florida, and will be draining all the way, keep inundating for the Ohio Valley and mainly east. So you can pretty much say central and eastern 2/3 below average for the 21st to the end of the year, end of November. And then, out west, pretty much fairly above average technically, for those last 10 days of November. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.